Do I like living in Poland? That is unquestionably the question that I get the most from Polish people to myself as a foreigner living here in Poland. For those who don't know, my name is Michael Rubenfeld. I'm a Canadian Polish Jew who moved to Poland about 10 years ago, where I now live with my wife and child. And yeah, it's been 10 years. And Polish people love asking me this question. I get asked it all the time. And I get asked it in many different contexts. Sometimes I get asked it from people who are clearly patriotic, maybe even bordering on nationalistic, who want to know if I'm going to answer correctly. Am I the right kind of foreigner? Uh, and sometimes I get asked it simply by people who think I'm completely crazy for having moved to Poland when I could live in Canada, which tends to be a place that a lot of Polish people want to live in. Um, it's a beautiful country. But um, every time I'm asked that question, I basically have to pause and think about it, because it's a hard question to answer. Do I like living in Poland? It's a very general question. Do I like it? Um, I think that I'm just a kind of grumpy person in general. So if you were to have asked me if I liked living in Canada, I would have said, I guess so. And when people ask me if I like living in Poland, I also want to go, but I don't want to go because I don't like living in Poland. It's more about the question not being specific enough. Do you like living in Poland? I think the better question might be, what is your experience of living in Poland? Uh, and that is, of course, very diverse. Or it might be, what is your experience of living in Poland versus living in Canada, which is also very kind of easy to define. But that said, I'm interested in answering this question, do I like living in Poland, in the best way that I possibly can. Now, this could be a very long video, and maybe this will be part 1 of 2 or part 1 of 3. But what I'll say is that I'm engaged living in Poland, sometimes too engaged. What do I mean by that? So, as you might know, when I moved to Poland, I made the decision that this move would also be about a kind of return to my Jewish identity through a Polish lens. So, and another way to phrase that might be through a Polish Jewish lens, or a return to being or to re-becoming a Polish Jewish person. In Canada, I wasn't a particularly engaged Jew, meaning I wasn't particularly engaged with my Jewishness on a daily basis. It was always a part of my identity, as it is for most Jewish people, but it wasn't the thing that I kind of allowed to define me very often. But moving to Poland, I made the decision to allow myself to start identifying as not just a Jew, but as a Polish Jew, and to explore what that might mean. So, for starters, it meant learning the language, or trying to learn the language. And I speak, a decent Polish. When Polish people hear me speak Polish, kiedy mówię po polsku, większość Polacy myślają, że mój polski jest nieźle. I zgadzam się, ale mam marzenie, że mój polski będzie lepszy, ale nie mam tak dużo czasu, żeby pracować nad mój polski. W każdym razie, I've subtitled that instead of translating it for those who don't speak Polish. But I speak the language, I would say, to an extent. I also started a Jewish culture festival and NGO that I've been running with my wife for I guess, 10 years now. And I also make a lot of Jewish art, or let's just say a lot of art that contains Jewish narratives or Jewish conversations or conversations about Jewish topics. Um, so that's fascinating because that was really never my point of concentration as an artist prior to moving to Poland. But as I said before, coming to Poland was really about this, adventure into re-becoming a Polish Jewish person. And I'm not a particularly religious person, if at all, although sometimes I do partake in religious ceremonies. But my entry point into my Jewishness is not really through religion. It's more through tradition and art practice, because I'm an artist. I'm a lifelong artist. I've been doing it my entire life. And it's how I understand the world, through making art about the world. And so I've gotten to make a lot of art here in Poland about Jewish things or questions that I have about Jewishness through a Polish context. And that's been fascinating and totally engaging and sometimes overwhelming, because working on Jewish subjects in a Polish context is never so simple. The Warsaw Jewish Community Center just recently kind of rebranded itself, or at least on the t-shirts they're now selling, to Jewish Joy. And it's kind of interesting. In the past I might have thought that was a bit cheesy, Jewish Joy, or simple. But in fact, right now, Jewish Joy is a more complicated thing to find because of the geopolitics of the world, because because of Israel having become the enemy of much of the world. And for most people, and unfortunately it is most people, they conflate Israel with Jews, and so all Jews have become a kind of bad taste in a lot of the world's mouth. And it sucks. It sucks. It's not joyful for the Jews. And then, of course, because of Poland's very tragic contemporary Jewish history, and yes, I'm talking about the Holocaust, there's always that kind of layer. So exploring or finding Jewish joy in a Polish context is particularly hard right now, because there's the Holocaust, and then on top of that, there's the shitstorm in Gaza and Israel, and also the global rise in anti-Semitism. So yeah, I mean, this is when it can become kind of overwhelming, because focusing on Jewish topics, it's hard to find joy in it. And I appreciate that the joy that the Jewish Community Center in Warsaw, by naming joy as an important tenet, it's making me think about it, and Jews here think about it. That said, yeah, it can be intense here. And so sometimes it's a struggle. It's more of a struggle. I would say sometimes it's more of a struggle with my health, or even with my mental health. It's not terrible, but it's you can't disengage. So, I talk about being engaged. It's difficult to disengage. That said, I am someone who really likes to engage, and I really like to question. I like difficult questions. I like, going into very thick forests and finding my way out. This is a metaphor, of course, not actual forests, but the forests of my mind, and trying to get through them, finding pathways and towards light and hopefulness. So I value that. I value that about Poland, that it's, there's a lot of thick forests to enter into, metaphorically and actually, but I tend to stay away from forests. I'm afraid of the dark and, ghosts and stuff. And this is a very haunted country. So that's my answer. Do I like living in Poland? There are some days where I just love it. I just love it. I love being here more than anywhere in the world. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And there are some days that I want to run away screaming. But my plan is to be here. I have no plan to go anywhere. I don't even know where I would go. There's nowhere in the world at the moment that I would rather be than here in Poland. Do I like living here? Sometimes. Do I hate living here? Sometimes. But, are you any different? Love you. Thanks for watching. Until next time, let me know what you think about Poland.